this and set your clocks to it. And here we are to be able to deal with a very important topic together. I want to hear from you. We're going to do shout outs in a moment and also load up your questions on especially the topic of diabetes. Our guest today is going to be Lewis Bertus, who's a physician assistant and diabetes reversal health coach. I am your host, Scott Ritsema. I'll tell you more about our brother Lewis and his program, but there it is. Diabetes 180 is the name of it, and we're going to be talking about strategies to manage your diabetes or a loved one. I think every single person probably knows somebody, if you're not somebody yourself, who's suffering from type 2 diabetes, particularly is the topic. So welcome to our program, and thanks to our sponsor, Revita Sinus and Revita Hands. I'm going to start with the hands there. You see that? I do not like the alcohol-based, smelly, sticky hand sanitizer. They're not even healthy. This is a super healthy, natural hand sanitizer with a nice fragrance. You pick that up at the Living Springs Retreat store, and your hands will thank you. They will be very happy. And then the Revita Sinus. That one is big this time of year. Not only protecting yourself from everything you touch, but stuff just goes up through there when you're breathing. And so to spray that periodically when you're exposed in cold and flu season areas, that is a good immune boost to you as you go about your business. It's got iodine in it, lots of good ingredients in that. And don't forget also about the Revita Guard. That's the throat spray. That's the tasty, minty one. But click on that QR code, head over to the LSR store and go shopping. All kinds of your needs will be met there as always. So we're happy to help meet the needs today on the topic of the type 2 diabetes challenge. Enormous proportions of Western society are edging into pre-diabetic, and large numbers actually diagnose type 2 diabetes. So we want to really tackle this one. Let's grab this bull by the horns and do everything that we can naturally with dietary changes. So I want to invite our friend Lewis Bertus up onto the screen, get to know our favorite diabetes 180 expert on this topic, a consultant and coach, helping people through managing and actually even reversing diabetes. So I want to ask you first thing, Lewis, how did you get into this? What got you interested in this? I know you were telling me that it involves a story of your own wife encountering a major lifestyle change that actually solved her diabetes. Tell us that story, and then how you and
Yeah,
she started this Diabetes 180.
for sure. I mean, it was definitely, I call it a beautiful union, right? So my wife is diabetic she's been diabetic 8 years, and I'm a PA. I'd say at this point, I'm about early in my career, maybe 1 or 2 years into my career, learning. I've learned of all I could about diabetes, of course. It's one of the things that we treat a lot in family medicine. So I'm wondering why she's not getting better despite all the meds that we're giving her. I mean, she's tried every medication, you name it. Whether because of side effects, she had to stop medications or switch to another, insulin. And at best, it might improve her blood sugar numbers, but really she wasn't getting better. And I knew, especially growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, how important it is to use natural remedies and lifestyle and healthy diet to reverse these chronic illnesses. So seeing her go through different diets, from vegetarian, vegan, and even that wasn't doing it. She was following advice from books online of like Neil Barnard. No knock on his work. I mean, he's doing great work in a diabetes world and continues to. But for her, she's what I would call a very resistant diabetic. And at this point, I'm not only frustrated with my wife's lack of success in managing her diabetes, but also my own patients, right, who are diabetic. And they're telling me the same things. Like, it's easy as a physician just assume that, they're not listening to your advice. That's why their sugars aren't getting better and they're not losing weight. But I saw my wife and she's doing everything that the doctor's recommending and it's not working. And I'm saying, well, maybe my patients aren't lying, So that with the combination of my upbringing, knowing that there is a way that can heal the body, and it's often very simple, because God's ways are always simple. He's not complicated. And so I went hard for about a year, just researching and reading and trying to figure out, okay, what is it? I know we were steering correct in a plant-based diet. My wife at the time, she had to turn keto. It was so bad that she had to go low carb at keto to get her sugars under control. That's the only thing that worked. So I'm doing all the research, and sorry, I didn't know the story was going to go so long, but I finally found it, and it was really simple. It was the fat, not the carbs, because all of us are told that it's the carbs or they'll tell you if anything, as long as you stick with let's see, a moderately low carb diet, doesn't have to be ultra low, then you can manage your diabetes. But no, it's fat that's really causing the problem. And once we addressed that, within 6 weeks, she was off medicine. It was crazy to me. Like, after 8 years of different diets, medications, insulin, and it took 6 weeks of changing her to a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet, and it did the trick. And since then, we've been doing it for clients ever since.
6 weeks. I mean, that is a huge turnaround in a short period of time after
Yep.
years of suffering. And you don't need to apologize for telling the story long, because that's a family's experience of wrestling with this, struggling with this. You're encountering the disappointments. Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Do we lose hope and faith? Is this just how I have to live for how many more decades? And you got the solution. And so I can see why you're inspired. So isn't it true that you started this program for people because of what you saw of the power of this method in your wife's life? Is that what inspired you and she to help others?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, like I said, why I call it a beautiful union is because I was already burnt out with the medical method, the medication first method, I should say, that I was trained on. So even if my wife hadn't been suffering from this illness, this condition, I think God was still guiding me towards doing a lifestyle-based coaching program, because that's where people need help. They don't need another pill. 95% of chronic diseases can be not only managed, but reversed with the right lifestyle and diet. And so as a physician, I felt burnt out. I felt unfulfilled. And I'm still a PA. I'm still working in the PA field. But I think people need that extra guidance on the proper lifestyle and nutrition to reverse chronic disease.
Absolutely. And if folks didn't catch the QR code, that's how you can find your way over to Lewis's program. But I want, by the way, when you say you can deal with chronic disease issues in natural ways, that's literally what Living Springs Retreat specializes in, is bringing people to the natural methods, doing a detox. Shepard, I'm talking to the engineer right now. Shepard, show the detox course, because that is exactly the kind of thing we are talking about here. That jump starts a 6-week experience, or a whatever length of time experience it takes. Use that QR code for that online detox course. But maybe many of our listeners don't really get what is type 2 diabetes. Can you just describe what it is and what are the causes of it? And then I want to come back to the questions about diet and what is your program and how do people get started with that and what's the protocol exactly. But let's kind of now drill into this diabetes question a little more deeply.
Sure. And this answer will also answer some of the questions that are being fielded here. I see a lot of people want to know what fat, what type of fat, how much fat.
Yeah, you just dropped that, Lewis. You just dropped a huge bomb on them. They're all just like, tell me more. And I'm like, oh, tell us what is diabetes, like, what? And then we'll come back to it.
This guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
It sounds crazy. It does sound crazy in the world in which we live right now with the trendy health advice that's going on around there. But I'm telling you, folks, he's on to something with this. So stick with us, and we will get to those questions. Keep loading those questions up.
Yeah. So what we have found when you look into the actual nutritional research, it's very clear what causes diabetes. It's insulin resistance. Everybody knows what insulin resistance is, right? Well, at least has heard about it. Maybe don't understand it completely. Has actually heard the word insulin resistance. But insulin resistance, just like the name implies, is when your body is resistant to insulin, right? This is what causes type 2 diabetes. And as far as type 1 diabetes, is totally different. Type 1 diabetics can suffer from insulin resistance, but what causes type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune destruction of the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. So your body's not producing it at all. However, even someone with type 1 diabetes can become resistant to insulin, meaning they need to inject more and more of it to get the desired results. And what causes insulin resistance, very simply, is too much fat stored in tissues that are not designed to store excess fat. Mainly, that's your muscle cells, your liver cells, of course, your pancreas is included. Many organs in our body were not designed to use fat as a primary source of fuel, but our diets are typically 30 to 50% fat. And once you correct that imbalance, you find that insulin resistance starts to reverse itself.
That's amazing. So a lot of people might be like, well, I don't even really count what percent of my calories are from fat, protein, carbs. I'm fine. And then you
Mhm.
look at data that shows what percent of people are already pre-diabetic and don't even know it. Give us a little bit of warnings about, you want to take this seriously, even if you're not type 2 diabetes. You want to
Yeah.
be looking at a diabetes prevention diet as
Right.
well. Just
Right.
the question I'm driving at is, what are the dangers of diabetes? Like, why is this such a big deal?
Okay. Why should people take it serious? I mean, it's 1 in 4 people, according to the CDC's, one of the CDC's latest measurements, are diabetic and don't know it. That should
Wow.
scare you. The 1 in 4 people watching this, I mean, ask yourself, how often do we go to a doctor and get diagnosed or get blood work, right? Or how many of us are going for our annual checkups? Be honest, be real, right? 1 in 4 people are walking around these streets with diabetes and don't know it, whether that be pre-diabetes or full blown. Okay, that's huge, and that number is expected to get worse. The signs and symptoms of diabetes, for those who may be curious, well, do I have it? Are the most common is excess thirst and excess urination. You're drinking all the time and always thirsty, and you're running to the bathroom like crazy. If that's happening to you, especially if you have a family history of diabetes, go get tested. But diabetes is why it's so damaging. Is one of the one conditions that literally damages everywhere in the body. Because think about this: we know that diabetes is is a disease that causes blood sugar, right? Sugar to be trapped in the blood, right? Too much sugar in your blood. Is sugar supposed to be in your blood? No, right? It's toxic. The next question is, where does blood go?
Everywhere.
Everywhere in the body. So you're everywhere in your body is carrying this toxic blood sugar, and that's why everywhere in your body is going to be damaged eventually. That's why they call Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's dementia, type 3 diabetes. That's why the leading cause of adult blindness is diabetes. That's why those who have diabetes are up to 4 times more likely, 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer a heart attack, suffer a stroke, end up on dialysis. That's the leading cause of kidney damage, right? Going down the body, leading cause of limb amputations, right? I mean, so everywhere in the body goes, everywhere the blood goes, this toxic blood sugar filled poison is destroying you. It's not something to play around with.
You put that well. And, we don't want fear, but you also want to know reality. It's like, if
Yeah,
the house is
yeah,
on fire, somebody's got to pull that alarm and start screaming, get out of the house, and we have a health fire in this country, in America particularly. I know we have a very international audience, but what you just described is
mhm,
not that difficult to solve, is the amazing thing about this. And I know
mhm,
your listeners are dying to get back to the question of what is the program and what is the diet. But
yeah,
you mentioned something that your wife had tried. She had tried the low carb and the keto. And tell us about, do those work? And then you mentioned vegan, vegetarian. That wasn't even working for you. So we got all these names and these
yeah.
different categories. And I want us to over the next few minutes,
Narrow it
kind of hone in on
down.
really what works. But start with that keto and low carb stuff.
Yeah. So it's good that we have the QR code right there, because that actually is a link to all the recipes that you can see what a diet looks like to reverse diabetes. These are 250 plus, just like advertised right here. It's one thing we're very proud of, a collection of 250, over 250 recipes that are all low fat, whole food, plant based to get started on. And with that link, you could also get consultation with me, and that we'll send you a link once you get the recipes. But what's nice about this is it's very, very simple. It's not complicated. Most people won't need to start off by measuring their fat intake. I know that's a big chore, right? To have to, okay, now I got to get down my fat intake. But the ideal fat percentage to be at to reverse diabetes, okay, or prevent it, is 10 to 15% of your total calories. No more than 15% of your total calories should come from fat from any source, okay? And we're not saying no fat. Low fat does not mean no fat. When you adopt a plant-based diet, the fats that are going to be in your diet are healthy fats, monounsaturated fats. What you're getting rid of is the dangerous saturated fat rich sources of foods: meat, dairy, eggs, and cheese. Right? Once you go plant-based, you're eliminating what we know is the cause of insulin resistance, which is mainly saturated fat, and you're helping the body to start to burn off the extra storage by keeping your body at a low fat percentage. And your diet, and most people don't need to do the percentage. They just by switching to a majority whole food plant-based diet, right? One thing I should also say, no oil, okay? A lot of people think that they're doing it, but if you're still cooking with oil, you're still using the highest fat food product on earth, vegetarian or not, because nothing is more fatty than oil, because guess what? Oil is just fat. Okay, that's what oil is. So oil-free, plant-based, meaning you're eating all your nutrition is coming from plants, not animal sources. So that's the way I could simplify that. If you find you're struggling, then you want to start tracking your fat percentage, to make sure you're not having too much fat from other sources like seed oils, nut butters, too much even. You can't have too much of even plant sources of fat if you're trying to reverse your diabetes.
You used a phrase a few minutes ago, low fat. Now, I remember back in the 80s, there was an emphasis on low fat, but it was like, now get the low fat dairy and get this low fat product and this new processed low fat thing. And look at
Yeah,
this diet health product. And it was under this guise of low fat, but it was the furthest thing from a healthy, what you're calling whole
yeah,
food, plant based diet, which I
yeah,
eat actually. I don't have
yeah,
diabetes. I'm not trying to reverse diabetes, but this is
yeah,
literally the diet that I eat that you're describing. And
yeah.
it's crazy these days to say that phrase low fat because you're like, oh, that was so discredited back in the
That's
day. It was
yeah.
discredited because
Call
you're
out.
replacing. Yeah, tell us about what went wrong. I mean, we know it was actually right because you don't want to be eating a high fat diet. And that's
Yeah,
proven
yeah.
not just in the diabetes research, but in the heart disease research with Campbell, Esselstyn, a
Mhm.
bunch of researchers who've done clinical and research based studies on this.
Mhm.
And you're helping people daily with this method. But what went wrong? Like, why do people
So
have a
first,
bad taste in their mouth over low fat?
yeah, yeah. And first, before I go into that, I want to cover the issue, because I know people really get confused about, okay, well, does that mean I have to watch plant fats? I can't eat nuts, seeds, nut butters. What we're saying is, if you have diabetes, right, and you have already made the switch to a whole food plant-based diet, and you still find that your numbers are high, you can't get off your medicine, the next step would be to try to limit even the high fat plant foods, right? Because you might still have too much fat stored in organs that need to get rid of it. Okay, so it's a case by case situation. In general, everybody should switch to a whole food plant based diet. That means minimizing processed foods, right? That's what the whole part means. And plant based meaning you're eliminating animal based foods. That's it. And then the next step would be to track your fat intake, right? So, yeah, there's so many studies. Now, I think that where we went wrong is and starting to villainize carbs is because when people went low fat, they, like you said, it was never truly low fat, right? So when people said, yo, low fat, we tried that. But if you look at the studies, people, when they went low fat, they probably went down from maybe 40% fat to about 30% fat. You know, we never really truly went low fat.
Okay.
Okay, so you can't say low fat doesn't work unless you actually try it, right?
Yeah.
And if you want, the best way to do it is actually track it. Download an app like Lose It is what we actually recommend. You guys, Lose It app is great. And just for 2 or 3 days, I challenge everybody here. 2 or 3 days, track your fat intake, and you may be surprised how much fat you have in your diet. Though, especially the ones who say I eat low fat, you'd be surprised. So that's the one thing. And of course, we could talk all day about the profit that is made by selling people animal-based foods. When something smells funny, follow the money. So when I see all this push for low carb and keto and just a replacement for Atkins and paleo, everywhere is telling you that you got to eat animal protein to be healthy, or you're going to fall to the ground. Yeah, follow the money. There's a lot
Well,
of money
what's
in
the
some.
difference? You said vegan didn't work for your wife. What is difference between vegan and whole food
Great
plant
question.
based?
Great question. So the difference between vegan and whole food plant based tells a lot. Someone who's vegan, they'll eat Oreos because Oreos is vegan.
True.
I'll eat So Delicious. Everyone about So Delicious. That ice cream, that's vegan. Yeah.
I, I,
You
I,
know,
I I just got to jump in. Hi, I'm Scott, and I am a recovering vegan ice cream addict. I am not joking, Lewis. It was a vice. That
was it
stuff
bad?
had me around the neck, man. I'd be, well, oh, I'm going through the grocery store. I better pick up one of those. Eat the whole thing, the little cartons.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
so you're saying for diabetes, that's not actually that much better of an option
Yeah,
than regular ice cream?
there's the obvious ones, right? Those are vegan junk foods, right? But then
Yeah.
there's also the less obvious vegan products that whole food plant-based diets are not eating. That's the processed meats, or sorry, the fake meats, right? Your veggie links, right? And veggie bacon and your possible whopper. If you look at the amount of fat in a possible whopper, it's the same as a real whopper, right? Yeah, if you're having problems with managing your health, right, whatever the condition, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and you're vegan, start with switch limiting and working on eliminating the highly processed fake foods, and start to increase your consumption of whole grains, legumes, beans. For sure, I eat beans every day, right? Fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds.
Okay, that's the key. So this is whole food plant-based diet.
Yep.
This is
Yep.
naturally going to bring your fat proportions down to a healthy diabetes
Yep.
reversal level as long as
Mhm.
you're not going you mentioned. Okay, so let's just review those. Whole
Mhm.
grains, legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas, etc., vegetables,
Mhm.
fruits,
Mhm.
and nuts and seeds. Now you can be slathering on tons of layers of peanut butter, and all day long, and that can
Yeah.
actually cause problems for your diabetes reversal clients, right?
Absolutely. And that's why we encourage people, okay, in the beginning, the first week of our program, you're going to start, well, first week, you're trying to keep a journal of what you're eating so you can see where you're starting. By the second week, what we're encouraging you to do is actually track your intake of fat, right? And many people on that second week, their eyes are open, like, okay, I can't be slathered on this peanut butter. Like it's very easy once you use tracking macros, apps that track your macros to see where your fat intake is coming from. And it's very easy at that point to say, okay, that's the problem food. I know this is healthy, but I'm eating too much of it, right? I need to cut back on how much of it I have. All right. That's what works.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking about the processed foods that you can eat that are plant based, they're not animal fatty foods that you're trying to get your clients off of. But the Oreos, the vegan ice creams, the veggie links, and fake meats, and all of that. I
Mhm.
had the thought the word vegan. actually doesn't tell you anything about what you are eating. It only tells you about what you aren't
Not eating.
eating.
That's it.
You
That's
know,
it.
meat, dairy, and eggs. Vegan just means I don't eat meat, dairy, and
Yeah.
eggs. But you
Yeah.
might
That's
eat French fries, soda, and Oreos and ice cream every
yeah.
meal of the day.
Yeah.
And that's not a healthy diet. So
It's
vegan
interesting.
really is kind of a meaningless word. I like your whole plant food,
Food.
whole food,
Yeah.
plant-based eating.
Vegan
What
diet.
were you gonna
It's
say?
interesting too because there's even like if you look at like places like England where people are vegan, they're usually vegan for environmental reasons. Okay, they're environmentalists. They're not too concerned. I'm not saying all of them, but studies show that when you compare Americans who go plant based versus people in England who are plant based, a lot of them are doing it for environmental reasons, meaning they're still eating the chips and the Oreos and things. And interesting enough, when you look at diabetes rates, it's worse in those places, right? Among those who are vegan, right? Yeah, it's trying to push people towards a natural diet, and what people usually need is support. They need help, right? I have some people I have contact, a lot of people I consult with, and they have the motivation, willpower to do it on their own. And then within weeks, they call me and say, "Hey, thank you for that half-hour consultation. It changed my life," right? But I feel like that's the rare person. The majority of people need support, and that's what we're here for to provide with our program, to give you that accountability, to remind you of your motivation, right? Your whys, and to keep you on track when you're ready to quit.
So this also has some aspect of addiction recovery involved with it, doesn't it? I mean, not formally, not
Yeah.
psychiatrically, but when you use the word accountability, I immediately went to, oh yeah, that's the word that's used with people coming off of alcohol addiction. We have junk food addictions, don't we?
Yes, we
And
do.
you mentioned the chips, and there's just so much junk food thrown at us everywhere we turn, and it's so highly advertised, so highly processed, with so much oil and sugar and animal everything all over the place, to actually find vegetables, fruit, real food, whole
Yes.
grains,
No brains.
actual
Yeah.
whole grains.
Mhm.
So speak to that, or if you want to talk about the brain and addiction and big food industry, I don't know if that's something that you deal with. But another thing
Mhm.
I want to ask you about, you can take either or both of these,
Mhm.
is carbs. People have the idea that carbs are the cause of diabetes and
Mhm.
sugar.
Mhm.
So talk to us about carbs, and
Oh,
and
sure.
and are they good? Are they bad?
Yeah, sure. So answering the first question, yes, we are addicted, right? We are overstressed, and high fat, high sugar foods make us feel good. It's a biological response. It's a dopamine release that your body, almost starts to get withdrawals from if you go too long without, right? There's studies that show that the areas of the brain and the strength of addiction is as strong as cocaine when it comes to sugar, right? So people need help. And that's why I think it's so important to don't try not to do it alone, right? To try to find organizations, support groups, do it and get some family members involved, make it a family thing. But don't do it alone. This is going to be a tough battle. But I promise you, everybody watching, it gets better. You can win this addiction. You're gonna be grateful for it. Um, yeah, but carbs. So just to highlight how important it is to stop blaming carbs, there's been a study that a lot of people, I think everybody should know about, and almost no one does. It's called the EPIC study, the European Perspective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition. This study took place over 12 years, involved 500,000 people, right? Following them over 12 years and comparing different parameters of diet and disease. And what they found is by simply replacing 5% of, of saturated fat from animal-based foods with fructose from any source. Fructose comes from not just fruit, but sugar. Okay. But if you replace 5% of your fat intake with carbs, your risk of diabetes drops by 30%.
Whoa. Yeah, that's
Just a measly five, you drop the risk by 30. And by
so
dropping
more
your
carbs.
Yeah, more. Yeah, so by replacing, yeah, by eating more carbs, and this makes sense because when you look at the populations with the lowest diabetes rates, they have the highest carb intake, right? If you look at the populations where people are living to their 80s, 90s, 100 years old, they have the highest carb intake, right? But of course, with that being said, they're also not highly processed, not eating a lot of sugar. It doesn't mean you should just start drinking soda every day. But uh, but yeah, it's interesting that the truth really is that carbs are not the villain, right? It's not really the cause of diabetes. And there's a lot of biology. Now we understand the biology of insulin resistance, how fat can lead to inflammation in the body, how it can start to cause your beta cells to become dysfunctional, and your body to no longer respond to insulin that's released by it, causing it to release more insulin, worsening the disease, causing you to gain weight. Fat is the source of it. It really is.
Lewis, the first time I heard somebody say fat is the thing that's causing diabetes, I was just
Yeah.
like, that man is crazy. That's a flat
Yes.
earther right there. And then it's actually no, the research says that. And
Supports it.
you have to, it hurts your brain
It's
to
hard.
have a new paradigm.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about with carbs, you said we're not talking about soda. So
Yeah.
what are good carbs, and
Yeah.
what are carbs that you want to avoid, if you will?
So I like to put it like this. Okay, let me use an analogy that I think worked well before. So if you equate calories to currency, okay, and I told you that you have only a certain amount of money you can carry in a day by weight, okay, would you want to carry bills or coins?
Bills.
Right, because it's lighter and it has more value, right? I'm not going to carry coins. A simple carb are like coins. So your pastry, your wheat flour, wheat based products, things that are highly refined, highly processed. They didn't go from the farm to your table. They went from the farm to a factory and then to your table. Okay, those are coins. Okay, they're not very nutrient rich, right? They don't have much value, as far as buying power of energy, right? But they are very heavy, and in a sense, they have a lot of calories, a calorie dense, calorie rich. Your dollar bills are complex carbs, right? Your beans, your whole grains, right? Steel cut oats, quinoa, millet, barley, those type of carbs that go from the farm to your table, right? Or at the very least, very minimal process in between. They're your dollar bills. They have high nutrition value because they haven't been stripped of their nutrients as much. They are low calorie because they're fiber rich, right? So the choice you have to make when you're eating carbs, am I going to eat coin? Am I going to live with coins or dollars? I want dollars, right? Give me the real stuff. Give me stuff that comes from the earth with minimal processing and get rid of that other crap. All right.
That's
That's
great. No,
simple as
go
to
ahead.
put it.
Well, in going back to your thing about the EPIC study and the longest living people in the world, they're studied. They're in the blue zones. The
Mhm.
longest living people in the world consume 50 to 80% of their calories are from carbohydrates. And
Carbohydrates, yeah.
they're not from white flour and soda and Oreos and
Mhm.
candy.
Mhm.
They're from these sources that you're talking about, Lewis. They're
Yeah.
from whole grains,
Yep.
beans, vegetables, fruits. That's nutritious food right there. You mentioned a few grains. I was wondering about, because you don't want to refine your grains, right? Then it
Yeah.
turns it into a harm for your diabetes journey
Mhm.
and prevention. So if you're looking at, you don't want to have refined grains, rice, brown rice, white rice. You didn't
Brown rice
mention
instead. Yeah.
rice.
So we as a family, my wife can eat brown rice, So brown rice instead of white rice. Oatmeal is a good example. A lot of people eat quick oats, right? Or rolled oats are better than quick oats,
Okay.
but steel cut oats are even better. Oat groats are the best, right? So the less chopping up of that carb, the more complete that carb is, the less fiber has been removed, the better. So we live in fast-paced world. We live where we're a high stress environment. So if I would say that if you're going to eat, like, for example, oats is a perfect example. If you're eating rolled oats and your blood sugars are fine, keep eating them, right? But if you're eating them and you're seeing that your blood sugars are struggling, start thinking, okay, maybe I need to turn to the less refined source of this carb and start eating something like steel cut or oat groats. So do that, with all your carb sources. Try your best to stick with as much as possible the complex carbs, the more complete carbs, less refined.
I want to go back to fat. You're talking
Mm.
quantity of fat is really the big battle for your diabetes reversal, but can you parse out the food sources that contain fat that you
Okay.
recommend, that you don't recommend? You already said, of course, animal products and oil are not going to be helpful to your clients. But you
Mhm.
said the nuts and seeds. Are there other sources of good fats? Talk to us a little bit more about the fats, because that seems
Great
to be the
question.
real
Great
trigger.
question. Yeah, it's tricky, right? And it really depends on where someone's starting from too, right? A lot of factors: how long you've had diabetes, your weight, your current diet, of course. But let's say the perfect diet, for diabetes reversal, you could put foods in a category of green, yellow, and red, right? Green are the foods that are naturally low in fat and plant based, right? So your fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, those are naturally low in fat. Now, when the yellow zone doesn't mean you get rid of these foods, but some of these plant foods that are higher in fat should be monitored at least, right? Avocado, right? And I'm not saying throw away the avocado. It just means that maybe you'll have to do a quarter of a avocado instead of a whole or a half. Okay. That's a big one. Another big one would be obviously nuts, right? So nuts is a very high fat plant. Doesn't mean you can't eat nuts anymore. No, it just means you probably can snack blindly on them. You might need to portion up just a small handful, a palmful, I should say, and that's it for the day. Okay, because you don't want to eliminate good sources of fat. You want to limit them so that your body has the best chance to reverse this disease. So I would say nuts and avocados are infamous. Of course, your nut butters are by extension. Less honorable mentions. I did a video on this. Soy milk, maybe like plant milks like that. You don't have to worry too much about them. But if you have a lot of soy milk, could be high. Can mess your numbers up if you're trying to get your fat percentage at a 15% or lower. Coconut is probably another one too. Coconut, not to say that you can't use coconut milk anymore, but you might want to watch how much you're eating. The best way to know is using just take 2 or 3 days and measure your fat intake and eat normally. Don't change anything, and see if you're at an average of 15% or lower. Yeah.
Okay, I want you to tell us a story or two of some clients that can give us inspiration, hope that we can do this. And
Mm.
then also, before you do that, just a practical question. How do you calculate your percentage of your diet that's from fat?
Um, well, so you'll have to get a food scale most likely for most foods to measure the accurate. Because when you enter the foods into apps, they'll ask you how many grams, or how many ounces. So I'm not gonna lie, it's annoying for a little while, but the
You just have to
information,
put every food in.
yeah,
You just have to input
everything
it.
you eat goes
Okay.
in that app, and it'll tell you a breakdown, how much grams and how much percentage of food you eat. Yeah.
That
But it's
that's a
worth it.
lot
The information
easier
is
than
worth
what That's a lot easier than what I thought. I thought I was going to be sitting there like, okay, calories from fat,
No,
and
no,
one
no. Just
one gram
use
equals
your modern
11.
technology.
Thank
Use
you,
your modern
thank you,
technology.
thank you.
Or
And you
uh,
recommend to your clients
yeah,
specific apps, I'm sure,
yeah,
so folks can follow
yeah.
that. Now, tell us
I
tell
think
us the story.
yeah, I'll tell you a story. And like I said, that's why you give away these recipes to make it easy for people, right? So they can get a good starting point. They're already at 15% or less. But yeah, so there's so many stories. One of the ones I love is probably the biggest turnaround on A1C I've seen as a physician or a coach. It was actually someone in a prison. So I work as a PA in a prison system, and guy, this actually shows you that if prisoners can do it with the limitations they have in food, we don't have an excuse. He got his A1C down from 15, right? That's very high. Okay. We start getting worried when your A1C is above 10. Okay, his was the goal is to get it to 7. He was at 15, right? He had no idea he had diabetes, and the reason why he had turnaround so fast is because he just was recently diagnosed. So he wasn't a diabetic for very long, but he went plant based, right? He cut out meat, dairy, eggs, and cheese. He went hard. He was consistent, and within 3 months, he went from 15 to 5.7.
Wow. That's
So,
awesome.
so 5.7 is the pre-diabetic level, or the beginning of it, right? So like just blew it out of the water, so that was amazing to me. I always like to tell his story. Another story I like to tell happens actually quite often is a client that was on her way to dialysis. Okay, the kidney specialist and nephrologist told her, okay, well, by next 2 or 3 months, we're going to check your kidney levels again, and at this point we're not expecting it to be any better. Okay, and so she was, preparing for a huge life change. At that point, she was willing to do anything. So she reached out to me. We talked, we consulted, and she switched to a plant-based diet. I don't believe she even measured her fat intake. She just started getting rid of animal-based foods in her diet. And she went back to the kidney doctor 3 months later. Doctor's ready to, give her to proceed to schedule dialysis appointments. And he looks at her numbers and says, your number went up. Like, how did your number improve? Like, he actually called the other physician. Is like, wait, am I seeing this right?
I love it.
The
I love it.
dialysis clinic lost a client, right? A customer. Yeah.
I think that's all of our goal is to help transition people from the disease management industry to true health care.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what you're doing. And I know you've got that medical background as a
Mm,
PA,
mm.
but anybody can do this.
Yes.
And
I've
really,
seen
we don't have so much need to medicalize everything, do we? And I know I'm pontificating, but what I want to go to questions. But before we do that, I want to ask Shepard, get those questions ready to be loaded up. But Lewis, what did I not ask you that you wish I would have asked you? Like, what did we not cover? That's, oh, there's this
it.
key, there's this piece. I got to say this that I forgot earlier, or whatever. Just open-ended question.
I think we covered a lot of the physical, but I think we definitely need to spend time on understanding the connection between mind, body, and spirit as well, right? I think the people who do the best understand that connection, right? And so my background is in theology. I was actually before going into healthcare, I wanted to go into ministry, is where God was leading me, and so it was interesting because I always felt pulled between healthcare and ministry. And then, I understood why. It's because they're very closely connected, right? Healing the body, restoring the body, restores the mind, helps us to connect with our spirit, with our Father, right? So if there's any reason above all reasons to get right and get our body right, is because it opens up the spirit for a stronger connection with our Creator. And it's the reason why Jesus was called the great physician, right? And so that's what inspires me, and what encourages me to make connecting with that higher power one of the key tenets of our program.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's the most important thing of all.
Yeah,
That's what really fulfills us and gives us meaning and purpose in life, is to serve others and to try to help people with their needs. I think
yeah,
that's beautiful. I'm glad you shared that.
yeah.
So we've got the cue and the prompt on the screen saying, send your questions in the chat. I expect we have some already built
We
up
have
at
a
this point.
lot.
Here we go. Deborah says, what do you mean fat causing this? Please, I know I added that tone, but that's my mindset when I first hear this. Like, hey, wait, what? Give it,
Mhm,
give
mhm.
her the abbreviated answer to that.
Yeah. So, uh, how can I make this simple? It's something that we first have to understand how insulin works, right? Insulin is a fat storing hormone, right? So, or I should say, energy storage hormone. It determines where to store energy, where to put it, and the most calorie, or I should say, the most energy rich source of food is fat, right? When you look at carbs and protein, there's 4 calories per gram. Fat has 8. Okay. Um, our body, so there's that. Our body also actually prefers carbs for energy. All right. So if you look at anything outside, right, when you walk outside in nature, through a garden, through visit a farm, a forest, the vast source of nutrition for humans has always been carbs. Our body digests carbs easily, right? It stores it easily. It can burn it easily. It can actually transition from food to energy easy. So it's the preferred choice for food energy. But now, because our diets actually have flipped on the head, and we've gone from a society that used to consume, I think I can't remember the number how much fiber people used to consume. But it's crazy how little fiber we have in our diet, right? We flipped our diets on the head, and now our diet is too high in fat. Now this hormone called insulin now has to figure out what to do with it. So it starts to store fat, and this is probably going a little long, but it starts to take this fat and say, I know carbs is supposed to be this body's main method of energy, but we got all this fat, right? And all this fat in our, not just the fat we eat, but the fat that is stored in our body, right? And if you're skinny, you're saying, well, I don't have much fat. You could have fat stuffed inside organs, your internal organs, without that causes insulin resistance, right? So insulin's saying, well, I'm going to take this fat, I'm going to store it anywhere I can. And everyone knows you can store fat wherever, right? You could fat wherever there's a place in your body, insulin will store it. And when this happens over time, insulin starts to get tired, right? Insulin starts to get overworked, and insulin says, I quit. Right.
That's a good answer. And part of this, I think most of our audience at LSR is aware LSR is a Christian ministry, and everybody's
Yep.
welcome from all walks of life, all faiths. People walk into Living Springs Retreat from every background. They're loved, welcomed, and but we don't hide our faith. And a lot of folks out there in the world of nutrition and the scientific community are coming from an evolutionary bias. And so
Yep.
they've got this idea that it's all, caveman carnivorous and that paleo concept. Whereas a biblical mindset on it actually takes you back to the book of Genesis, where God created man at peace with the animal kingdom in the Garden of Eden. And there
Mhm.
wasn't that. So, and we'll go back to the previous one, if you wouldn't mind, Shepard, because I want to get her
Yeah.
question too about losing weight. Thank you. We'll get to you, Joy. I just wanted to throw
Okay.
that in there that, from a theological standpoint, God's appointed diet for mankind in the beginning was that plant-based, all whole plant foods, and there
That's
weren't
right.
any
It's
factories
simple.
refining it. And you mentioned the word fiber, Lewis.
Mhm.
If I was to sum up everything that I've learned about diet in the past so many years from this community, from Living Springs teachers, from Barbara O'Neill, fiber. Fiber is like the one word answer to so many of our problems. If we
It
just
is. It
eat
really is.
only high fiber, full fiber foods, we don't even need to complicate it. We could have like an hour and a half live stream just down to like
No.
10 seconds. Eat
Yeah, we
only
literally,
food full of fiber. But Joy Smith is
literally.
asking about weight loss, or if you wanted to comment more on that, let's see if we can get through the questions quicker. I'll stop
Yeah.
pontificating
No
here. But
problem. No problem. No problem.
weight
So
loss, how does that play in?
weight loss is going to happen naturally. Okay. When you switch over to a whole food plant-based diet, it is almost like impossible not to lose weight, right? Because you're, like you just said, the majority of your food is coming from fiber. Fiber has 0 calories. So when you're eating more fiber, you're eating a low calorie diet. And what's crazy is you're eating more food. You could actually eat more food. You could eat till you're full and still lose weight. It's the only diet on earth where you could eat more and weigh less. Tell me that's not God.
I'm
God
sold.
does not want us to suffer. God did not design us to be on diets. He wants us to eat to abundance, right? To enjoy the fruit of the land, right? Literally the fruit of the land. And when we do that in natural ways by limiting, or if not eliminating completely, the high fat animal based sources of foods, you can eat to your full and lose weight. I don't call it a diet; it's a lifestyle.
Oh, that's a win-win right there, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to twist my arm. You got to get off
Yeah.
of the junk food. It's an addiction. It's a withdrawal. There's a period of time where it's painful, but then just enjoy eating to satiation every meal for the rest of your life. You don't even have to worry about it. Shepard, take us to the next one, please. HK says, what about eating fruit? I have heard both ways. Fruit is bad because of the sugar content, and then no, it's okay because it's natural sugar. Which is it? I was hearing from a guy who wrote like the fat for fuel. He was one of the super low carb guys, and he reversed himself completely like a year ago or 9 months ago. He's like, actually, I know I was warning you guys don't eat fruit. It's all wrong. And he had a complete paradigm shift because the research is actually showing us. What are
Mhm.
you going to tell us, Lewis? I think I
Yeah,
know what you're going to tell us, but
yeah.
maybe I'll be surprised.
Yeah, and of course it makes sense for that people think it's the sugar, right? It's the fruit because once you stop eating fruit, your sugars get normal, so it must be the fruit, right? But it's a symptom. It's a symptom that when you eat fruit or anything that's carb related and your sugars go high, it's a symptom that insulin's not working well. It's not the cause. It's not the cause. We have to differentiate between symptom and cause. It's the very reason why I dare somebody to go on low carb or keto diet, right, for any length of time, and then take a glucose challenge test and tell me their diabetes was reversed. Okay, because a lot of people say, if you go low carb, get rid of the fruit, then you reverse your diabetes. If that's true, then how come when you stop eating an apple, your sugars go up? You didn't reverse anything. You're just masking the symptom. Okay, the people on our program can eat fruits for breakfast, right? Type 1 diabetics can eat fruit for breakfast and use less insulin once if and only if they address the root cause, right? You got to address the root cause. Once you address the root cause, like I think we've exhausted, which is the fat stored in our bodies that needs to be released, right? Needs to be burned off by eating a low fat diet, then you can tolerate your tolerance of fruits goes up as it naturally would because you've reversed the disease. You're no longer living in that disease state of insulin resistance. So I hope that answers it. And also, I know a lot of people say fruit turns into fat. This, man. So the amount of energy it takes to turn a fructose into fat is so high that it will take a whole lot of sugar, right, before it starts to transition into fat. But what's interesting is that people are more worried about sugar turning into fat. So then they go on a high fat diet.
Yeah, good point. Oh, that was
Like
the mic drop
fat or
moment.
fat?
Thanks, HK. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one, Shepard. Oh, awesome. Nut butter is a bad thought. It was a good fat and protein. Yeah, nuts are good for you. So
Yeah,
parse
yeah.
that out for us, Lewis. What are you getting
Yeah,
at?
so I think they're being specific in saying nut butters, right? Nuts instead of nut butters. That's why I would recommend, right? Because again, if you're thinking about whole foods, you're trying to minimize the refining process. Does this mean this is not an elimination diet either? I like to call it an inclusion diet. Try to include by including. I think especially focus on what you can increase in your diet. Increasing whole foods, nut butters are not going to bother you, right? But if nut butters are 30% of what you're eating because it's convenient, you're gonna have a problem, right? Even if it's just 80% of your diet is all whole food plant-based, of course you could eat some nut butters. It's fine, right? But again, going back to the beginning, if you are still struggling with diabetes reversal, don't call Lewis a liar until you got your fat percentage down by tracking it.
Down to 15% or lower.
And then you might find, maybe I need to eat less nut butter. Yeah.
Lizzie is asking about beans, so they have too much carbs, and if go and just answer that one.
Yeah, beans, yeah, this is probably the best thing you could eat. Beans is the best you could eat. Rich in fiber, rich in phytonutrients. Studies have actually shown, a quick Google search will show you that the more beans you eat, it actually can control your blood sugars, so that the next time you eat carbs, you're less likely to experience spikes. So beans are one of the best carbs to eat. I would say eat it every day. It is not bad. Yeah.
That's awesome. And just to go back to the previous guy's question, he mentioned the protein in the nuts, also the nut butter.
Yeah.
Are you worried about people being protein deficient when you're
No.
going so low fat and they're not eating meat?
And especially this is coming from a gym enthusiast. I mean, I grew up in the gym working out and downing protein shakes and stuff like that, and so convinced that, you got to get your protein in, There's no other way to say it, but it's a scam. If you eat a plant-based diet, you're going to have enough protein. Most of us actually have too much. Okay, you don't need to worry about protein. My gains in the gym, personally, have actually increased when the more plants I ate, right, without worrying about proteins. I threw away the protein shakes. Protein is found in every plant.
That's
Okay.
great. That's a good answer. Rena says, what do we use to cook with if we can't use? Okay, so you mentioned very early on, you were like, diabetes reversal, you can't even be cooking with oils. So she's
Yeah,
asking about a practical recipe question, I guess. How do you
yeah,
cook when you got to
I love
ditch the
that.
oils to get that fat down to
Yeah,
15%?
I was surprised, when we learned this too. I was like, man, what are we gonna cook with? Like that oil? Like, isn't this food gonna burn? you know, it doesn't, surprisingly. Just with
Water?
water, the same amount of oil you would use, you add water to the pan or pot, and it does the trick. You could also, some people use vegetable broth. Honestly, I started experimenting with soy sauce. Just throwing soy sauce in the pan and cooking with that. Yeah, you just need moisture. That's how the chemistry of cooking works. It doesn't necessarily need oil; it needs moisture. So any liquid can do. Yeah.
Great question, Rena. It's a question I had early on, actually, in this journey, too. Shepard, can we get another question? Rose asks, what can help a person who has lost half their body weight and has lost muscle and collagen with a lot of loose skin? Now, that's not a diabetes question, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, Lewis.
No,
If
but
you want
that's
to
fine. I
punt,
mean, yeah, yeah, it's a good question. And so,
yeah.
yeah, that sounds like, definitely, I would say specifically, you're probably not eating enough. You're not eating enough. Especially if a person is transitioning to a vegan or plant-based diet, the first problem is they usually try to eat the same portion sizes that they used to eat when they were on other diets or animal-centric diet. But no, you have to increase your amount of food, right? You have to actually, because a lot of the food that you're eating, like I said, is fiber, and the fiber has no calories, right? It does have a lot of other nutrients. It's feeding your gut. It has a lot of other health benefits, but you want to eat more food. Another thing you could increase in to make sure you're increasing muscle, to gain back lost muscle, and collagen, is probably focusing on plant sources of protein, right? So that's where I would say probably supplement using soy milks, tofu. Of course, you can nuts in moderation. Beans, probably I should start with beans. Legumes are high protein. Whole grains are also a good source of protein. Um, yeah, but what it comes down to is eating more. That's usually what the problem is, not eating enough.
Yeah, just more volume because when it's
Oh,
fiber, it looks bigger. I mean, people see the giant plate of food I have, and they're like, "How do you eat that
I'm
much
gonna
and
eat
you're
all
not
that.
overweight?" I'm like, "It's so much fiber, you know. It's the nothing refined. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
refined sugar. It's not refined fat. It's not refined
yeah,
by an animal who went and ate the
yeah.
grain. Then you eat the animal or it's eggs or dairy."
Mm.
Dana says, "Can
Oh,
diabetes
yeah.
make people cranky?"
Let me ask my wife about that.
Be careful with that one.
I don't know if I should answer that. But
We got
yeah,
to get her on the live stream.
yeah, for sure. I think for a couple of reasons, not only because of your body's in state of, of oxidative stress and inflammation when your sugars are uncontrolled, which definitely can affect your mood. But I think just what we call diabetic burnout is a big reason, because it's very frustrating disease to deal with, right? It's a disease that seems like, people are very quick to quit on because they feels like it's almost personal failure of their body. The body is letting them down. So yeah, I think there's two things: the physical reason, the stress that high sugars put on the body, but also emotional, just the stress.
Yeah. Yeah. HK asks about egg whites because those are, not the fat of the yellow of the yolk. What do you say about egg whites?
So I would leave off egg whites, because studies have shown that even animal proteins, and there's a lot of we'd have to talk for a while in the science, the biochemistry of it. The components of animal proteins actually contradict health. They're contraindicated in health. So when it comes to longevity, when it comes to cancer, when it comes to diabetes, the same study, those who replace 5% of animal proteins with carbs also saw a drop in diabetes. Okay,
Interesting.
so protein is also another. I know we villainize fat enough. We didn't talk about protein, but if you're going to talk about protein, animal protein is a problem. It really is. But for time's sake, we probably have to make another live on animal protein, and it'll be worth it.
Well, it goes back to that thing about how they had the low fat dairy in the 80s and early 90s. And that just increased the proportion in the dairy that was protein, that was animal protein called casein, which is carcinogenic. And so you see,
Yep.
it actually is not helpful. You want to
Yep.
replace all that with fiber. Dolores says, how can you eat more beans, legumes, etc., when they cause you to be gaseous?
Yeah. And I'm glad you just asked that. There's actually been studies. They said, do beans really make you toot? I think that's the study was called. But it's actually over exaggerated. I think the effect of gaseousness that people get. Some people might be more sensitive to others than others, of course, but it does tend to get better with time. So in the beginning, when you're transitioning, what's happening is your your microbiome is like, you're feeding me now, because your body was, you probably were depleted of fiber. Beans is a great source of food for your gut bacteria, right? And over time, especially as you start to get normalized in gut bacteria, the population of your microbiome starts to normalize. Yeah, the gaseousness will improve and become less frequent.
That's good. That's good. And yeah, so just have some and then add more over time. This all sounds great for those with loads of money. Pretty difficult for those who can't afford it and have no choice but to eat the meats, etc. And isn't beans and rice cheaper than meat?
Appreciate. So the thing you're going to replace meat with is beans and whole grains, which is the cheapest food. People, the poorest societies, are living off of corn and potatoes, right? So it's actually something that people who say that unfortunately have not tried it. They have not tried the switch. But I definitely understand the sentiment. I did a video on YouTube recently where I took a colleague of mine. We compared our groceries. We have similar sized families. She spent more money than I did. Not just mainly because of meat, really, but it's because the processed foods. Okay, a lot of us are eating nutrient poor, calorie rich foods. We're talking about the boxed cereals, the chips, the juice. These are things you're getting rid of, and you're saving a whole lot of money doing it. Right, you're saving a whole lot
Yeah,
of money. Yeah.
absolutely. Some of the cheapest food is sweet potatoes, and it's one of the most nutrient dense also.
You know,
So
one
if
of
you
the most
want the
nutrient dense.
intersection between cheap and healthy, sweet
Yeah.
potatoes, baby, all day long.
Burrito, a bean burrito is probably the cheapest thing you could put together.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I don't know about it personally, but
Biblically speaking, there is nothing prohibiting the eating of meat. See scripture provided earlier. The herb eating Christian who looks down on the meat eater has a problem. I appreciate that. Nobody should look down on anybody. If that's ever done, let's all go back to being like Jesus. I literally in my devotions this morning, I was in this part of the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says the Father sends the Son to rise on
Mhm.
everybody, the evil and the good alike, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. So nobody
Mhm.
should ever get some sort of
Look down.
judgmental attitude.
Absolutely.
What you have for? Yeah, you agree.
I agree completely, And of course, the context of that verse, we have to understand it's talking about meat offered to idols. But I would say on that, to answer that, we have to also understand the context of the times of Christ and all the disciples, and of course the patriarchs and prophets lives. The meat they had is not the meat we're eating. Okay, the quality, the preparation, and of course the toxicity of our environment has changed things a bit, and we can't escape the fact that science has shown, multiple studies have shown that animal-based foods actually affect our health, our chronic disease states.
Yep, no doubt about that. So there's your free recipes for diabetes reversal again on the QR code. I'm guessing since another question didn't come up, they are taking us to the end here. If there are no other questions, we can give
Yeah.
our parting blessing to all the viewers. What are your final words, Lewis?
So yeah, of course, take advantage of this free recipes so that you don't have to start tracking your food and food apps unless you really won't like to do that. This is a no-brainer way of doing it. I think it'll help a lot of people. Once you scan, I want to let everybody know that you will get an email, and you'll have an opportunity in that email to schedule a consultation if you're interested in the diabetes reversal health coaching program.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we will see you next time on our next LSR Live. The guest is going to be Dr. Joyce Chet from Med Missionary, and we're going to be dealing with autoimmune disease questions, managing life and thriving even in those contexts. So 7 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. We will see you guys then. Lewis, brother, thank you so
Been
much
fun.
for being here.
Been
And of
fun.
course, I want to thank our producer, CDN Christian Digital Network. From likes to lives changed. Scan that QR code, subscribe to their YouTube channel, and we'll see you all next time on LSR Live. I'm your host, Scott Ritsema.